G'day guys, one of the questions that I get asked most oftenly is how to go about writing a list for competitive Warhammer 40k. There's lots of different advice out there, however I think a lot of it is misleading. So today, what I want to do is give you some real practical tips on how you can make sure that the list that you run is competitively viable, creative, unique, interesting and exciting. So with that being said, let's get stuck into the video.
Blog for the Blood God.
Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Hi, I'm Dean Simbeck, President and CEO of Blog for the Blood God's exclusive high-quality dice warehouse and emporium. Due to a shipping error, I'm currently overstocked with Blog for the Blood God exclusive high-quality dice, and I'm passing the savings on to you! Roll 9-inch charges, pass invulnerable saves, roll high for damage, and score lots of hits. Check out the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today. Alrighty guys, before we break down some of my list writing tips, tricks, and strategies, I want to talk a little bit about the fundraiser raffle for Blog for the Blood God. This year, I am representing Team Australia as captain for the WTC team, which is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I'm really excited. However, unfortunately, as life tends to do, it's thrown a whole ton of bills and unexpected costs my way, including some veterinary bills for my very sick cat. And as a result, my ability to attend this once-in-a-lifetime event is threatened. So if anybody wants to show some support and show me that you've appreciated the content that I've put out over the few years and want to help me out here, you can head over to the Blog for the Blood God fundraiser raffle, links in the description below, and that's where you can go in the running to win a set of neoprene objective markers or some Blog for the Blood God dice, and all of the proceeds will go towards helping me in these financial challenging times. It will ask you to enter your state if you are an Australian resident. This isn't a particularly relevant piece of information if you're from overseas or you're from a state that's not listed. Just tick whatever, it's just for record keeping. And that being said, let's get stuck into the video. Alrighty guys, so there's a lot of different places where you can get resources for list writing. You can look at forums, you can look at Reddits and Discords, and you can look at Goonhammer, and you can look at all of these different elements. You can watch YouTube videos, you can get lists from events, you can borrow people's ideas. There's tons of stuff you can do. However, there's a few principles that I want to share with you that if you keep them in mind, they will greatly increase the quality of the lists that you run and the enjoyment that you get out of the event. The first tip is to look out for anchoring bias. Now, what anchoring bias is essentially a cognitive fallacy, and I'll give it to you in this example. If you have a jar full of jelly beans and you get people to estimate how many jelly beans are in there, secretly, the average of all of those estimates is almost always accurate as to how many jelly beans are in the jar. However, if you put out a sheet and you get people to write down publicly what their estimate is, the more people that guess, the further from accurate it becomes. Because the first person writes down their guess, and then the next person anchors their guess on that first person's. So if the first person writes 1,000, and the second person was thinking it's like 200, they're not going to guess 200, they're going to guess closer to 1,000, right? And then as a result, you get this cluster of guesses that are all around each other, which is further from accurate than if everybody just guessed in secret and guessed with, whatever they truly felt. And the reason that this is relevant to Warhammer 40k is we often get anchoring bias when it comes to the lists that we run. You'll see somebody will win a tournament with a list, or you'll see that there's something that's really popular in the meta, and as a result, a lot of people tend to anchor around that, right? So an example in World Eaters could be Angron and a unit of 6 Exalted 8-bound with Lord Invocatus. It's a very, very popular starting point for a World Eaters list. Lots and lots of people do it. However, you could make an argument that that's anchoring bias. And I have achieved very good results running, instead of the 6 Exalted 8-bound, running 2 units of 3. There's also people out there that are doing fantastic work with no Exalted 8-bound and running Mauler Fiends instead. There's people doing it with Demon Princes and things like that as well. So Hellbrutes are another good example. So even though the people at the top are achieving great results with Exalted 8-bound, that doesn't mean we should anchor ourselves to that. You need to open your mind and have a bit more of a holistic first principles kind of look at these units. And I'm going to give you some tips now on how to analyze that specific part of the process. Before we go on to the next point though, I do want to make another claim here, and that is that great minds think alike, however, fools seldom differ. We've all heard the great minds think alike, everybody says it all the time, however, that's actually only half of the quote. And the full quote is that great minds think alike, but fools seldom differ. And what that's trying to say is that yes, there's some people that are out there that are creative that will come up with really interesting ideas and solve challenging problems. And yes, most of the time, great people will come up with similar ideas. However, the key word here is similar. They differ slightly. And the same can be said for Warhammer 40k lists. Great minds come up with these really cool lists. However, they're never the same. They're never identical to one another. So you could use the Art of War Boys as an example. Running World Eaters, you've got Jack Harpster running a Lord of Skulls, and you've got Anthony Vanella running without the Lord of Skulls. So both great minds, great lists, great ideas, but they differ. That's the key point. And fools seldom differ, which means that those people who see an Anthony Vanella list and just download the exact list and then play that exact list are fools. Because generally speaking, and this is where it becomes a specific thing to 40k, is if you didn't write the list, then there's a decent chance that you aren't going to fully understand why each unit is in it and how they operate, right? So if you're just copying the list that won the most recent event or the list that's performing currently at the highest for that faction, you aren't actually going to fully understand why the list works the way that it does, and you're not going to get the results. You would be better off designing the list yourself, and even if objectively speaking that list that you designed was suboptimal, you would get better results playing it than if you just took the latest Goonhammer article or the latest Auspex Tactics video and just plugged and played that list. So it's really important to sort of take that creative look at your own lists and start running them. So I'll give you a practical example. I run Khan the Betrayer on his own, no unit of Berserkers attached in my lists. And a lot of people, when they copy my list and they take it to events, they report back to me going, Khan was useless. Khan didn't do anything, right? But the reason that Khan is in that list is because you can launch him out of his Rhino on his own and sit on an objective. If your opponent shoots him dead, which they're going to try to do because he's very easy to kill, you can spend a CP to sticky the objective. If they try to charge him, first of all, he's relatively tough against small things, but he's still probably going to die. And the key here is Khan the Betrayer always fights on death. And if he fights on death, there's a decent chance he's going to kill the thing that just killed him. And then because they both died simultaneously, because he fought on death, you can then sticky the objective, even though there's nothing left on it. So Khan the Betrayer is a really cool tool that I use to secure objectives. Now, if you just read an article that said Dean ran this list and got good results, and you went, okay, cool, I'll run the same list, you aren't going to know that that's why Khan's in the list. You aren't going to know that that's how he functions. And as a result, you're not going to get the results that I'm getting because you don't fully understand the way the pieces work. So understanding that is really important, and that's why copying lists directly from the internet is often a mistake. One of the other key reasons why copying lists from recent tournament results is a mistake is because everybody in the world is going to see those lists, and if those lists are achieving really good results, they're going to start planning on how they would go about beating that list. So if you run World Eaters with a whole bunch of 8-bound Exalted 8-bound Lord Invocatus and win tournaments, right, if that's a thing that's happening in the meta, people are going to start bringing things like Scouts, start bringing Infiltrators, start bringing screening units that can prevent you from getting that Alpha Strike, and then they're also going to bring things like indirect pieces that are able to shoot your 8-bound before you get an opportunity to go in and do your damage. So if you see an established metagame where people are taking certain things and getting good results and then copy it, chances are you're going to be 2 or 3 steps behind the meta, and then as people solve the meta, they will have solved you before you even get an opportunity to hit the ground running. So this is why going off meta, where you run units and combinations that are not part of the traditional metagame, is really, really powerful. So an example of this is a list that I've been writing with one of my coaching clients is a Land Raider, a Khorne Land Raider, with a unit of 6 Exalted 8-bound and Lord Invocatus. And the idea here is that if your opponent does that with the screens, they put their scouts out, their infiltrators, they have their artillery pieces or whatever it is, their shooting elements. If you go first, you can scout back into the Land Raider, and that Land Raider being deployed out of line of sight right up the front is not going to die to any indirect that they have, or any real combat that they can throw out at turn 1, because most people's turn 1 combat threats are not going to be able to do enough damage to kill a Land Raider. And as a result, it's then going to tick over into your first turn, and those Exalted 8-bound that are inside that Land Raider almost have the same threat range as they would have got had you been able to scout them first turn through your opponent, because you're going to be able to disembark out 3, then move your 9, potentially 11 with a Blessings roll, so now you're moving 14, then you're auto-advancing 6, so now you're going 20 inches and then charging your opponent, and all of that is not blocked by being within 9 inches of enemy models. So they can put all of those screens out, and then you're able to just launch out of your Land Raider straight past all their screens and hit that artillery that they've got hiding in their backfield somewhere. Really, really powerful combo, but it's very off-meta. When was the last time you saw somebody bring a Land Raider, right? And as a result, or especially a World Eaters player, right? Like we see Loyalists do it a little bit, but World Eaters very rarely take a Land Raider. And this off-meta pick allows you to actually get around some of the things that your opponents have teched in an attempt to beat the World Eaters. Another good example of this is a unit of 10 Terminators. You might look at them and go, yeah, but a unit of 6 Exalted 8-bound is just as good. But it's like, well, hang on a minute. 10 Terminators, it can charge something like a unit of Plague Marines, and even though they have fights first, when they fight, they're only going to kill 2 or 3 Terminators, right? Which means you're going to have 7 to hit back. And those 7 being World Eaters Terminators are going to get +1 to hit because they've taken casualties. Those 7 Terminators hitting back are going to wipe out that Plague Marine unit. Whereas if you have Exalted 8-bound, first of all, you don't have the 2-up armor save and the 4-up invulnerable save, so those Plague Marines, when they hit you, they're probably, instead of killing 2 or 3, they're killing 3 or 4, which means you're only hitting back with 2 Exalted 8-bound, which is not going to be enough to kill those 10 Plague Marines. So the differences between these two units is night and day in that particular anti-meta matchup. Being able to use something like Terminators, which are off-meta, people aren't planning around, people aren't predicting, and then you go, cool, I'm actually going to rapid ingress my Terminators, and then from there I'm going to advance and charge them, and I'm going to hit this unit that you think is unchargeable. They've put their Plague Marines on an objective thinking, World Eaters can't touch me, and you're just like, I don't care, I'm just going to power through. Meanwhile, you're using your bolters to shoot down their Nurglings from across the board. That unit can flip that matchup. And you will never find these sorts of tricks if all you do is copy what they take in the metagame. If you only ever copy the things that the competitive players have achieved success with. What you need to do is look at the units and have an honest assessment on your own terms about how valuable they are. Another real cool example of an off-meta unit that is really, really powerful, and when you look at it, it's really hard to understand why it's not so popular, and that is the Hellbrute. Now, the Hellbrute has a really interesting rule where every time your opponent allocates an attack against you, after they finish resolving their attacks, you get to fight as if it were the fight phase, right? So basically what you can do with this guy is you can rapid ingress him on the side of the board, then move him and charge him in with an advance and charge so he can go real deep, fight something small like a transport or something like that, then when they fight you back, you get to fight them again. So you charge the transport, you hit it, say it's a Land Raider, you hit it, you do half of its damage, then that Land Raider has to fight you back because they have to make attacks in melee. Then, because the Land Raider is not going to kill you in melee, you get to fight again, you blow up the Land Raider, then say 10, whatever, fall out, aggressors fall out, you can pile into them. Then when they fight, you activate the -1 damage. They fail to kill you. You get to fight again, and you get to kill a whole bunch of aggressors. And now you've taken this 150 odd point Hellbrute, and you've gone, cool, I'm throwing this in, and I'm just doing massive amounts of damage. Now, there's obvious reasons why people at the top of the meta haven't selected this unit. But the idea of a metagame is that it's cyclical. If they're not currently taking it, if it's not currently being spoken about, that in itself gives the unit more power than just its raw data sheet. You take these off-meta elements, and then you're able to actually do more damage than what your opponents would expect from a World Eaters player. I had a great conversation with an undefeated World Eaters player recently who did this with Mauler Fiends and Forge Fiends. Most people look at a World Eaters list, they're not expecting shooting. But when you bring 3 Forge Fiends, you actually have a ridiculous amount of shooting. He's doing battle shock tests to people, and people weren't prepared for it. There were Custodes players at that event that thought they were an auto win into World Eaters because they're like, yeah, I just sit on objectives and I always fight first. So if the World Eaters charge me, I just fight, interrupt, and kill them. And even if I charge into their stuff and they're going to fight me, I can neg 1 damage and the World Eaters don't kill me. The 8-bound do nothing, right? So these Custodes players thought that they were green light into World Eaters. However, the Forge Fiends, if you play a World Eaters player with 3 Forge Fiends and they start shooting into you, that's a big problem. If you then throw Khan the Betrayer with his 3 damage, fights on death into you, you throw units of regular 8-bound with their 3 damage weapons in, you can do ridiculous amount of damage to top meta armies like Custodes into things that are considered low tier like World Eaters Forge Fiends. So my advice to you would be, look at the top meta armies and try to understand what it is about the units that are in that tick and why they're so good, but don't give yourself that anchoring bias. Don't lock yourself in to taking the same units. Have a look at it and then consider what alternative options there are, what other interesting lists you can write that have units that you think are good for reasons that you understand. That's the best way to write a powerful Warhammer 40k list that's unique, fun, and exciting. Alrighty guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that and got something out of it. If you did, like, subscribe, and fill that comment section with your ideas for off-meta picks. And as always, check out blogforthebloodgod.com for ways you can support this channel. And please feel free to join us over on the fundraiser raffle, where you can buy a raffle ticket, helps me get through these financial situations that I'm facing, and also gives you an opportunity to win some sweet swag. With that being said, we're going to end it here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I will see you in the next one. Cheers.
Blog for the Blood God.